Hi, how are you? It's Dr. Moso. Today we want to talk about the sources of the history. We are going to do a question together. Here is our question. Identify any five sources that we use in history. What are the five sources that we have in history? Don't forget, when we answer part A of the question, ordinary level or level, we are supposed to give five points. We are supposed to name, we are supposed to state, we are supposed to identify, we are supposed to list five points. So here the question now, it wants us to identify five historical sources. So the five historical sources include, we've got a source called oral tradition. This is one of the sources that we have whereby the elderly members they narrate what took place a long ago. We also have got a source called written what records. It's another source that we have in history whereby we use textbooks to know more about the historical past. We also have got a source called archaeology. Archaeology, we are talking about the digging of fossils, the relics, the artifacts that were used by the people who survived long ago. We also have got a source called rock paintings. Rock paintings, we are talking about the paintings that were done by the people who survived a long ago. We also have got a source called linguistics. Linguistics, which is the study of languages, the languages that were spoken by the people who survived a long ago. We also have got a source called anthropology. So these are the sources that we have in history. So the question here, it wanted five, so you can give any five of these as your answer. Number B, describe any six disadvantages of using archaeology. What are the disadvantages of using archaeology as a source? Number one, we see that archaeology now, as we have it as a source, it has got so many disadvantages. So when we are answering this question now, describing any six now, we are supposed to give a point. So we are supposed to give a point. Then, when we give a point, we explain the what the point. So we are going to give a disadvantage. For example, archaeology, it has got a weakness in that it does not give us the names of people. Yes, we know that this bone, it's an artifact, it's a relic that was used by those who survived long ago, but we don't know the person who ate the bone, the person who ate the meat. So archaeology, it has got a problem in the sense that it does not provide us with the dates. So you can say that archaeology does not provide us with what names of what of our people. Full stop. The historian and he has to put information on the bone so that we know more about the artifact that was dug by that historian. So you give a point, you explain a point, you give another disadvantage. Another disadvantage is that archaeology now, we see that the artifacts, they may decay. Artifacts might decay. It's a point. Then you explain the decaying of what? Of artifacts. Because those artifacts, they were used long ago. So there are chances that the artifact might what? Might decay. So you talk about that as your what? Your disadvantage. You move on, you give another disadvantage of what? Of archaeology. You also talk about this archaeology. It is expensive to dig those artifacts. It needs money. The expenses now we incur. So when you give that point of expense now, you explain the point of what of expenses. So by so doing now, you are going to have a B1 6 points and the explanation is 6 points. Then you are in a position of getting 12 at 12 12. So on part B, when the question says outline any six, Describe any six. You are supposed to give a point, then you explain your point so that you can get 12 out of 12. Then let's go to part C. How useful has archaeology been in the recovery of prehistory in Zimbabwe? How useful was archaeology? How useful is archaeology in the recovery of prehistory? So when we answer part C, we start by identifying keywords. So here our keyword is how useful. Another keyword is archaeology. Another keyword recovery. Another keyword prehistory. Another keyword Zimbabwe. So we have identified the keywords. We have useful, archaeology, recovering prehistory in Zimbabwe. So we talk about the usefulness of archaeology. It is useful. Why? Because a lot of history that we have in Zimbabwe, on Great Zimbabwe, on Mutapa, on the Roji, we are told by archaeology. Archaeologists, they to dig, they to dig, they to discover a lot of artifacts on how these people were surviving, and we're in a position of knowing the pre-historical states that we have in what are in Zimbabwe. So you show us how useful. So it means that when you give us the points on how useful now, you are saying it's to a greater or it's to a lesser what extent. You can say to a greater extent, archaeology it is useful because you give us your reasons why you are saying to a greater extent it is useful. Then when you have given your points now, you skip one line. You now go to the lesser what extent. We also see that although it is useful, but however now to a lesser extent now, you talk about the disadvantages of this what of this archaeology does not provide us with names of people, decaying of what of artifacts. Those are the problems now. So you can say that it is useful, but to a what lesser what extent. Or you can say that although and archaeology is useful now on the lesser extent now, you talk about the other sources now. It is complemented by the other sources, so that the other sources now they give us a lot of information on pre-what history. So on part C, when you answer part C, make sure that you have got judgment, greater extent, and also what lesser extent, so that you are in level 3, 8 marks. So that is what we have on this question on the sources of history. Thank you so much. It's Dr. Moso.